1933, a summer's day in Manhattan's Lower East Side. There are children playing outside on East 4th Street. It is August and they are full of energy, shouting and running through the street, determined to enjoy the last of the season before the autumn sets in. There is nothing unusual about any of this. Suddenly, the door swings open at 29th East 4th Street and an old woman emerges onto the stoop overlooking the street, waving her arms wildly and shouting to the children to be quiet. The children, as well as the adults on the street, all recognize her. Gertrude Treadwell, who's lived in the house for over 90 years. Born there only 7 years after her father purchased it in 1833. She is enraged. She tells them they are being far too noisy, they must calm down. The children quiet, turning towards the high staircase that leads to Gertrude's front door, looking up with fear at the old woman who, satisfied, turns around, goes back inside and shuts the door. There's nothing unusual about any of this, except for the fact that Gertrude Treadwell passed away several weeks beforehand. Gertrude Treadwell, born 1840 in the very house from which her spirit would chastise the exuberant children many cobweb decades later. Her past revealed a domineering father and a lost love, and 80 years after her death, her spirit is rumoured to still roam the house where she lived all of her 93 years. Her life began as the youngest of 8 children. Her father, Seabury Treadwell, a merchant who had a successful hardware business. 5 years before Gertrude was born, he moved his brood into a new federal-style townhouse on East 4th Street. At the time, the area between Washington Square Park and the recently opened Lafayette Place was the most fashionable section of the city. The house was purchased for $18,000, just over $500,000 today. Comfortable after years of successful trade as a partner in Treadwell & Kissam, an importer of English marine hardware, he had retired that year at the age of 55 to live off his interest and investments. Like their wealthy neighbours, the Treadwells filled the house with the best furnishings, patronising the workshops of New York's finest cabinet makers, such as Duncan Phyfe and Joseph Meeks. Outside their windows, the elite of New York society rode by in sleek carriages, on their way to the theatres just a few blocks away on the Bowery. A New York newspaper in 1835 extolled, "The elegance and beauty of this section cannot be surpassed in the country." The Treadwell family was already large. He and his wife, the former Eliza Parker, who was 17 years younger than he, had 6 children. Moving in to help were 4 servants. The same year the family moved in, another daughter, Sarah, was born. 5 years later, in 1840, the couple's 8th child, Gertrude, was born in the second-floor bedroom. Gertrude grew up in comfort, but her life took a tragic turn. Her father, an Episcopalian, forbade her to marry a certain Lewis Walton because he was Catholic, Irish and poor. Gertrude, heartbroken, never married. Perhaps she refused other suitors to spite her father. Seabury Treadwell died on the evening of March the 7th, 1865 at the age of 84. His funeral was held in the parlour 4 days later on a Saturday afternoon. While interior design fashions had changed, they certainly had not arrived at number 29 East 4th Street. There were no alterations made to the house during his lifetime. After his death, the family cautiously updated the parlour with the addition of a few up-to-date Victorian upholstered pieces. Otherwise, as Gertrude would later repeat again and again, it was left as Papa wanted it. Along with her mother and several other never-married siblings, Gertrude continued to live in the dark curtained house, which solemnly protected them from the rapidly changing world outside of its walls. Eliza Treadwell died in 1882, and by the turn of the century only Gertrude and her sisters were left in the house. It would appear that the Treadwell fortune was by this time drying up. In an October 1906 letter to the New York Times, a certain G. Ellsworth chided the editor for an apparent exposé of the sisters' finances. As one of the oldest subscribers to your paper, I beg to insert this paragraph to contradict and absolutely deny the erroneous statements set forth in the columns of the Daily Times of Saturday last, respecting the surviving daughters of the late Seabury Treadwell. Suffice it to say, despite the assertions made to the contrary, they are only in comfortable circumstances and are practical, thoroughly good loyal citizens of the substantial old type of character, handed down from generations back. In quick succession, the parlour saw the funerals of Gertrude's sisters. Sarah died in 1906. A year later, Phoebe fell down the staircase to her death, and in 1909 Gertrude's last sister Julia died, leaving her alone in the last elegant home in the neighbourhood. The city outside the marble-arched entrance to Gertrude's home was no longer the enclave of the privileged. Commerce had taken over. The lower floors of once proud residences that remained standing were transformed into shops and warehouses. Their marble stoops were removed, the interiors gutted. Where hansoms and cabriolets once transported the wealthy, trucks now ruled supreme. Gertrude, however, remained isolated in her time capsule, keeping everything preserved. Nothing was discarded. Dresses and combs, books and letters, everything was kept intact and in place exactly as things were in 1835. By 1909 she was 69 years old and alone. The blinds were kept closed in the drawing room, the dining room was never used, and the dust of years accumulated. The Times wrote in 1936. As she grew older and more eccentric, she became obsessed with holding on to the elegant home in a neighborhood that had become, by the early 20th century, a run-down, semi-industrial and disreputable part of town. Burdened with severe financial hardship in her last years, she somehow managed to keep the beautiful home in nearly original condition, long after all the neighboring private homes had been demolished or converted into boarding houses, tenements or commercial structures. She died in 1933 in the same four-poster bed she was born in. Phoebe, Julia and Gertrude lived out their lives in the East 4th Street home, surrounded by the familiar possessions of their parents. When Gertrude Treadwell died in the upstairs front bedroom at the age of 93, the house had been occupied by the Treadwell family for almost 100 years. By then Gertrude was impoverished, yet she left one of the most valuable legacies imaginable, the only family home in New York City to survive intact from the 19th century with original furniture, decorative arts and personal possessions. In the late 1930s, Helen Warden Erskine wrote a series of sensationalistic articles about the Collier brothers, two wealthy hoarders who had all of Harlem talking. Erskine and other reporters launched their careers, writing about the sordid details of the brothers' lives and their demise, including the nearly month-long search for one of their bodies in 1947, which was eventually discovered in their home beneath piles of junk. But more than a decade before the Collier episode, it was another recluse story, slightly less sensational but no less mysterious, that captured Erskine's attention. That would be Gertrude Treadwell, a spinster and the last inhabitant of 29 East 4th Street. Erskine wandered towards the address on a winter afternoon in 1933, just a few months after Treadwell's death. Turning into 4th Street from the Bowery, I came upon this hauntingly beautiful old house, all the more striking by contrast with its drab surroundings. She recalled this in her 1953 book, Out of This World, a collection of hermits and recluses. Its walls were pink brick, green shutters framed its diamond-paned windows. Handsome black hand-wrought iron basket ornaments flanked the steps leading to a white entrance door, crowned by a graceful fanlight. The doorbell was one of those old-fashioned china knobbled pulls. When Gertrude died penniless and alone in the midst of the Depression, George Chapman, real estate agent and cousin of Gertrude, jumped at the chance of buying the house, intending to preserve it as a museum. He reports that he discovered a secret passageway at the bottom of a closet between the second floor front and back bedrooms. The front bedroom had belonged to Gertrude. "Nobody could have been more surprised than I," George recalled. "Underneath that bottom was a trapdoor. When I raised it, I found a ladder extending down to a small secret chamber on the first floor, between the drawing room and what is now the dining room." Closer investigation revealed that it had probably originally continued down to the cellar and out to some hidden exit near Astor Place. George also found a man's jacket there, in a style that was popular in the 1860s, about the time Lewis Walton would have been courting Gertrude. Erskine asked what became of Lewis. George said he went to Seabury and asked his permission to marry. It was denied, no surprise. After that, according to the family legend, Lewis was never seen again and Gertrude became a recluse. When George Chapman purchased the Treadwell house, he recognized its importance and the need to preserve it. He opened it as a private house museum in 1936, supporting the cause with his own funds. Unfortunately, house museums in the Depression era were not greatly popular, and he did not have the resources to maintain the aging structure. When he died in 1962, its condition was perilous. Water had seeped into the brickwork, causing the facade to buckle outward. The chimney tilted dangerously to one side, and inside the carpeting and fabrics were faded and worn. That year, the Decorators Club of New York City adopted the house as a pet project. The draperies were reproduced, including painstakingly hand-making the heavy tassels. The patterned carpeting was also reproduced from a swatch cut from the parlor. Yet the structural problems were more than the Decorators Club could tackle. New York University architect Joseph Roberto was consulted, and he took on the project in a nearly single-handed effort to save the building. Over 9 years of structural restoration brought the house back. Roberto's wife, Carolyn, an interior designer, worked with the Decorators Club to restore the furniture and interior accessories. As evidence of Gertrude Treadwell's careful preservation of her family's things, a volunteer one day was going through clothing in an upstairs bedroom. Putting her hand into an evening cape, she pulled from the pocket the program from a play that had taken place in the late 1800s. Like almost everything in the house, it lay protected from time, never having been touched since that last Treadwell sister nestled it into her pocket after the theatre nearly a century earlier. Over the years, there are dozens of sightings of odd and inexplicable things happening in the house. Since the early 1930s, museum staff, volunteers, visitors and neighbors, including people who just pass by the home, have reported seeing, hearing and smelling unexplainable things. In the early 1980s, tourists turned up at the house and rang the bell. A woman in period costume told them politely that the museum was closed for the day, and could they please come back at another time. Later, when they ring the museum staff to get the hours, they are told that the museum was in fact open when they came by, and that furthermore, none of the staff ever dresses in period costume. Gertrude has also been seen inside the house, sometimes humming, sometimes playing the piano. She occasionally appears as a young woman, but more often as an elderly lady. She is also seen on the staircase in the front bedroom where she died and hovering within view of the front door. According to Emily Hill Wright, the museum manager, there is often an indent on Gertrude's bed as if someone were sitting on it. Emily says the staff will smooth out the bed before they leave for the night, and the indent will be there in the morning. Nor is she alone. A visitor to the house in the summer of 1995 claimed that while upstairs she had a lengthy conversation with an older gentleman in a tattered suit and heavy wool jacket, smelling of mothballs, who talked to her of what the house was like to live in. After listening to him for a few minutes, she turned her back on him for a moment, and when she looked back, he was gone. Later, she identified the man she had seen from photographs, Samuel Lennox Treadwell, Gertrude's brother who had died in 1917. Seabury Treadwell is also rumoured to haunt the merchant's house. Staff and visitors have reported to feel a presence around them in the upstairs bedrooms. Some visitors have even encountered the apparition of him. One group of people claimed that an elderly man asked them to leave and blocked their entry to an upstairs study. As they went to leave the property, they caught a glimpse of Seabury Treadwell's portrait downstairs and recognised him as the man they had just interacted with. The upstairs bedrooms are another active location, with many hearing the sound of children's footsteps running up and down the nearby hallways when no one is around. Within the bedrooms, made-up beds have been found disturbed without explanation. Many light anomalies have been caught on camera, along with hundreds of EVPs. Since opening to the public, many ghost stories and accounts of paranormal experiences within Merchant's House have circulated. It is widely believed that New York's Merchant's House is the most haunted place in the city and continues to function as a home to the Treadwells, long after their deaths. Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. A little something different this Halloween. I didn't go overboard with the horror this time. I just thought a little bit of gentle creepiness would be the order of the day. And I think that's a perfect story for the more discerning viewer. I think that's quite a nice story to cover. And I've been meaning to do it for quite some time. I've never been to New York City. I've never been to America for that matter, but that is definitely one place I would be visiting if I was coming to America, which I intend to one day. Yeah, while I was making this, I was when I was researching the part about Helen Erskine Warden going along that street and viewing the house and describing it, I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to have gone back in time to be with Helen, walking along the street, and I would knock on the door and convince Gertrude to let us in, and hopefully she'd invite us in for a pot of coffee. Crazy, isn't it? But I just think, wow, wouldn't it have been fantastic to actually see it while she was still living there? Wow, you'd just be absolutely... I mean, even back in the 30s, it would have looked ancient, I'd rather see it as it was than as a museum, if you know what I mean. Yeah, but of course, I don't think she would have let anyone in, not even me. The castle keepers let me in, but I'm not sure if Gertrude would have. Yeah, but I think maybe she felt a bit ashamed of their straitened circumstances, or her family's straitened circumstances. Maybe that played a factor in the reasons that she wouldn't associate with her neighbours and such like. Yeah, a very interesting case. I mean, that is an amazing piece of history that still survives. And what really quite annoys me is looking at this photo here of the surrounding area. I just think that is a real shame. I would like to know your thoughts on this. I mean, look at the dilapidated buildings around it. I mean, New York City's got a lot of money. Couldn't they afford to buy out these properties and build a park around it? I think the house deserves that. I can see graffiti on the side of the wall too, of the actual building, of the museum. I just think it's not right. I think the house, Merchant's House, I really believe Merchant's House deserves better than that. I've heard online, I read online that they're talking about building some massive building to the right or left of it, going to be really high, and it might even damage the foundations of Merchant's House. I'm thinking, how can New York City allow that? Once it's gone, once something like that's gone, it's not going to come back, and that's a really important part of New York City's history. Anyway, I won't go on about that. I'd love to know your thoughts about that. I mean, look at that. A rotten old garage next to it. Build a big park around it. Make it more attractive for people to come and visit. I don't know what that area is. It's at the Bowery. It's pretty rough. Is that correct? I've never been there, so yeah, you can let me know about that. Also, Helen Erskine Worden was definitely into the things that I was into. The Collier brothers, and any of my loyal veteran patrons would know, and subscribers on YouTube would know that I've already covered the Collier brothers 2 times. I did a silent version way back then, and then sometime after I did a narrated version, and that was also a fascinating case, and I would love to read that book of hers. I would say it's probably out of print. Maybe I'll have a look on Amazon or eBay, see if I can grab a copy, because she was definitely into the things that interested me. Yeah, good on you, Helen. She got to meet the Collier brothers. Wow. And she nearly got to meet Gertrude, but I don't think she got in. I wonder if she knocked on the door. I would think she would. I think she would have. I mean, she was quite an aggressive reporter. I think she would have knocked on the door and didn't get an answer. What do you think? You'll have to excuse me, my dear friends. Today my brain is half asleep. When I was talking about Helen Worden Erskine knocking on the door of Gertrude, well, Gertrude had been dead a few months before Helen came to visit, so I must apologize there. My brain is just not waking up today. Then again, Gertrude may have been inside as a ghost, looking out and still determined not to let Helen in. Apologies for that. Yes, a few viewers have suggested to me about a social site called Discord, where you can have a better experience with the live stream. I haven't done a live stream for a long time. I will be doing one sooner or later. I'm really so much work at the moment. It's just it's getting around to doing it. But Patreon is sort of in cohorts with something similar to Discord called Throne. So I might be looking at that, joining that. And then we can have a sort of one-to-one or a small, you can have the normal live stream, of course, too. But I think you can have like a one-to-one or just a few of yous, like a chat room. We can actually talk to each other in real time. I mean, it's not just me talking and you typing messages. Where we can actually talk to each other. I'm going to be looking into that very soon. I think that might be something that would be fun for us to do. I like to interact with my viewers. I think that's very important, and I enjoy doing it. And I know a lot of you guys enjoy it too, so that's definitely something I'm going to be looking at. They just sent me an ad the other day, Throne, which reminded me about it. I had previously thought about it and promptly forgot. So I'm going to be getting into doing that. Next case is Vintage Crime. That's all I'm going to say. And it's quite interesting because I actually have a very creepy artifact from that case. Yes, something that belongs in the Black Museum. So I'm going to be showing that too at the end. The quite very rare item that I have. It's nothing fantastic or spectacular, but it's rare. I can assure you, you'll see anyway once I do that case next. And I know there are some fanatics in the United States and probably elsewhere in the world who collect these sort of objects that have belonged to famous murder cases, etc. So eventually I might sell it. It's not really doing much. It's just hanging around. Anyway, I'll show you that when it's coming up. I think I'll sign off now. It's over half an hour. I probably had more things I wanted to talk about and have forgotten. When I'm doing the video, I think I'm going to talk about that at the end. I'm going to talk about that. And then when I get, because obviously I'm not doing it all in one day. This takes days and days and days. And then when I get around to doing the end speech, I've forgotten half the stuff I was going to talk about. Yeah, and often, with the editing, I mentioned this to a couple of viewers in the comment section of another video that I'll get stuck in an editing part until I'm not satisfied, until I'm happy with it. And often I'll go back to it and go back to it. And it takes up so much time, I know. But I want you to be happy, and I have to be happy before you guys are happy. And I'm blah blah, and I haven't even had a coffee. Well, I've had 3 today, but that was quite a while ago. So I think I will now wind down. I'm going to get this video saved, do a sort of check, see if there's any mistakes with the editing, etc. And I'll probably still miss stuff, but there you go. Anyway, your suggestions about Throne and Discord, any of you who are aware of it and know about it, let me know what you think. I think it'll be a good idea. Could be fun. It could be fun. All right, my dear friends, take care. God bless. Thank you for your loyalty, and see you for the next case. Bye-bye.